everyone, welcome to another episode of Films Gala. Films Gala is a platform which is aimed to teach about filmmaking and the business of film. On today's lesson, I will be teaching about how to practically write a screenplay. Through the course of this lesson, I will be reflecting on a screenplay which I've already written called Rasta Lava, which I intend on producing in the near future. Now, there are keywords which form part of this lesson which are important to understand. So let's start first by explaining these keywords. Thematic argument is the central belief which unifies and molds the direction of the narrative. Binary code or binary opposition is a related pair of contrasting ideas which are related. Conceptual relevance is the visible problem in the environment which inspires the protagonist to have a desire or quest or goal to solve the problem. Emotional relevance is the internal flaw, psychological or emotional, which the protagonist must conquer so that they live a fulfilled life. Genre is a category or style of movies. Genre conventions are themes, settings, elements, characters, and plot beats which are prevalent in a particular genre. Structure is the manner and order in which events of a story are presented to the audience. Now that we have explained those keywords, I will further explain how I used those keywords in writing Rasta Lava. So my writing process starts out with the idea, followed by the writing treatment, then the outline, then my writing routine, which essentially is the schedule. From the schedule, I will know when to write and how many pages I'm writing. Then I will proceed to writing my first draft religiously. After my first draft, then my second draft, then my third draft. So let's start first with addressing the idea. So when it comes to ideas are found everywhere. I mainly have or keep a journal for ideas. So these ideas can come from conversations that I hear in the public spaces, whether I'm in a combi, wherever I am really, whether I'm at home. As long as I find an intriguing conversation that I think, you know what, that could be a line for dialogue to use, that person could be a character that I can use in my story, or that event that happened is something that I can somehow incorporate into a much more bigger story. So that's the whole point of keeping that journal, so that eventually when I do have an idea that resonates with me, that's when I know that I can then expound on it. So once I have an idea that resonates with me, that's when I write the writing treatment. The writing treatment includes things such as the title of the story, the genre of the story, the reference of the story. So these are reference films, so films which may have a similar storyline to the idea that I have. So from there, the log line, then the target audience. Who do I think this movie is for? Because not every story is for everybody. So I need to write my screenplay knowing that it's catered to a specific audience. How does this audience look like? What are their interests? Where do they go out to eat? What types of book do they write? Do they read? So essentially that's that. So the target audience, from there I come up with the thematic argument of the story. So the thematic argument essentially is what will mold the direction of where the story is supposed to be from a philosophical point of view. So once I'm done with the thematic argument, I go down to my characters, and address things like the conceptual relevance of the story, conceptual relevance relating to the goal of the main character, then the emotional relevance relating to the emotional need that needs to be fulfilled within the character, or the flaw which the character needs to overcome in order for them to attain that particular goal. So from the idea to the treatment, from the treatment to then my writing routine, which involves coming up with a schedule for when and how many pages am I gonna write religiously. Once I have that schedule, then I can begin writing continuously till I finish with my first draft. Then I make the corrections on my second draft, then my third draft. When I'm done with my third draft, I take that third draft, give it to another expert within my field to read, preferably a screenwriter, who will then give me advice on structure, characters, or any form of criticism or feedback. I welcome it with open ears, open mind, because I know that within that criticism I can find valuable information which I can use to improve my screenplay. So now let us go in depth with the idea of what Rasta Lava is about. Rasta Lava follows a story of a guy who falls in love with a lady who is out of his league. You could say that's a typical story that we have watched. Yes, but I decided to take on that idea and add certain plot twists and mix genres. So mixing drama with romance, with comedy, to mash up and create an interesting story, which the initial story, which would have been just a boy meets girl story, a love story. Now with mashing up of these genres, it allows for the plot to play out differently other than being a love story. So Rasta Lava is a story about Jakes, an individual who stammers, who has some form of speech impediment, and he falls in love with this girl who is quote unquote a slave queen, out of his league. She doesn't date guys who are below average. So Jakes is the type of individual who runs a small business. He's a street vendor. He sells sweets, he sells snacks, he sells airtime. You know, a really small community business which is centered within the streets. So Tato, being the love interest, she is more of somebody who dresses quite well. You know, she's into makeup, fancy hairstyles, fancy shoes, so on and so forth. and she loves money. And by that virtue, these two individuals, they don't complement each other. More especially that this individual, Jakes, has a speech impediment. He doesn't speak well. He finds it hard to articulate himself. It's difficult for him to express his love. So I thought that would be an interesting idea to write a story about somebody who has a love interest. But the plot twist comes into play when we are thinking in the back of our mind that this story is just about a boy meets girl. But Jake's primary goal is to make money for two reasons. One, he's already running a small business, so he's making some little money. However, when that business gets ruined by the mere fact that he takes money from the business which he co-owns with his friend Bugs to take Tato out on a date, this ends up causing friction between Jakes and Bugs, as a result causing that relationship to break off. So they no longer become business partners. Because why? Jakes doesn't know how to manage money well. Number two, his character flaw is that he's a naive individual. So he's easily trusting, he's gullible. So now, adding on top of that is that he doesn't come from a wealthy family, this being Jake's. As a result, when he doesn't have a source of income now and the landlord wants money because he's staying in a one room, he sort of has to find alternative ways of making money, which now causes him to start looking for a job. In today's world, looking for a job is hard, more especially, even if you are qualified and have qualifications, it's not that easy. So that is just basically the idea that I wanted to incorporate. Now, when you have a story idea, your title or the title of the story is supposed to hint towards the genre of the film. Like, for example, Star Wars gives us the idea that this is a science fiction type of movie. Jurassic Park sort of hints that this is an adventure type of a movie. So Rasta Lava hints at the fact that this is a story which has romance or as one of the elements within it. So now we have addressed the idea. Then let's move on to the genre. So the genre which you are writing your story around will inform how the story will look like in terms of the setting of the story, in terms of the types of conflict that could play out, in terms of there's things called genre conventions. So each genre is different from another genre in terms of how that genre is executed. When you look at a thriller, it's not the same as a comedy, right? So the story will play out differently. The settings of the story play out differently. The characters play out differently, and how they express the characters, how those movies are shot, play out differently. The costumes, the story world also, the basis of that comes as a result of the genre conventions. We spoke of the title, we spoke of the genres, we spoke of reference films, we spoke of the idea. Let us now address the logline. So a logline is a basic description of what your film is about. So it's a very brief explanation of what your story is about, as opposed to a synopsis, which is a much more detailed explanation of what your story is about. A logline can be 1 or 2 lines. Let us address the logline of Rasta Lover. This is the logline of Rasta Lover. When Jakes and Tato break up, she ends up stealing money from him, which belongs to a gang leader, Fadere, which puts their life in danger. So, like I said, Rasta Lover is not your typical love story. So these two, they break up, and the main reason why they break up is that Tato cheats on Jakes. As a result, Jakes assaults Tato. So out of frustration, Tato ends up stealing money. Now this is not just any money or money that just belongs to anybody. This is money that Jakes acquired from selling drugs on behalf of a drug kingpin, a gang leader named Father. So this puts Jakes and Tato's lives in danger, because the drug kingpin at a certain point will want his money back. As I have addressed from the idea perspective, I didn't just want to create a story that's just about love. I wanted to create a story that has a lot of drama and thrilling moments in it. So I wanted to incorporate an element of criminality into the story, and also reflect the kind of society that we live in now. Locally, where I stay, or in Botswana, the sale of drugs is on a rise, especially the consumption of a street drug called cat. So we know that in our society, not just in Botswana but also in neighboring countries, unemployment is a big thing, right? So youth sort of either just stay at home and do nothing, or found alternative ways of making money. And as I've said, Jakes now has to make money because he has failed to find a job. He's about to get kicked out of his 1-room house where he's paying rent, and he doesn't have the rent money now. So what alternatives does he have other than to go and sell drugs? But he just doesn't start selling drugs, you see. And the reason why he doesn't just think of selling drugs as the first solution is because of the thematic argument. So what the thematic argument is that it's a central idea or belief which unifies the story. It molds the story. It's what philosophically the conflict of the story is about. When we forget about the events and look at the philosophy behind the story, it's what essentially the story is trying to address. So with Rasta Lover, the thematic argument is selling snacks to get out of poverty is better and safe than selling drugs to get rich. So there are two ideas that are at play. There's two arguments that are at play, of which the main character, the protagonist, Jakes, has to go through. One is he has to sell snacks, or when we meet him in Act 1, he's selling snacks, right? And why is he selling snacks? Because that's the safe thing that he could do. He doesn't believe in selling drugs, right? He's an educated individual who cannot find a job. So the safest thing that he can do is, you know what? let me do my side hustle, which is basically let me sell some snacks till I can find a job, save up some money. However, he's bad at managing money, which is one of his flaws, right? So the thematic argument it's how it explores how the conflict of the story is gonna play out, right? In Act 1, you have to establish, before you even begin writing the actual story, at the treatment level, you must have that thematic argument, your own thematic argument, because when we meet your character, we have to meet him as one individual, and towards the end of the story, he has to become a changed individual. That is only addressed by the thematic argument. So now the main emphasis of my thematic argument is that he will change to become a drug dealer, and as a result that will put his life on danger, because when you sell drugs, number one, you risk having enemies from other rivalry dealers or gangs. You risk being arrested, going to jail, going to prison if you get caught. Number three, you risk your life becomes in danger, because the addicts can kill you for the money and the drugs. So now we can see that by that, moving from something that's safe to something that is dangerous causes some sort of friction. But in order to achieve that, the stakes needs to be raised, or the character needs to have something which causes him to go into the latter aspect of the thematic argument, because the thematic argument explores two parts, the first one and the second one, the latter one being how the character will essentially change and what do they learn from that at the end. So I decided to raise the stakes by saying, okay, fine, let's put this character in a state of desperation. The initial source of income from selling sweets is no longer there, because now he has broken up with his friend. Raise the stakes again by saying, okay, fine, he has to pay rent. He doesn't have money to pay rent. If he doesn't, he's gonna get kicked out of the house. Number three, he has to make money because he wants to impress this girl, right? So that's why I'm saying ideas, when you have an idea, you can take an idea which is ordinary and expound on it by adding different elements so that it becomes much more rich. So we explain the log line, which is Jakes and Tato. After Jakes and Tato break up, Tato ends up stealing money, drug money which belongs to Father, thus putting both their lives in danger. Thematic argument: selling snacks to get out of poverty is better and safe than selling drugs to get rich. So we have those three key things. Now that we have them, then we can explore other things like the binary code. So the binary codes, or the binary opposition of this narrative, Rasta Lava, is poverty versus rich. So plot wise, theme wise, we're exploring, even in terms of setting, we're exploring we're exploring events which would display somebody as being poor and another character as being rich. Even in terms of the setting, how do we establish that within the character, the protagonist's living space. We do that by the missing scene. The missing scene being the elements that we see within the frame that depict who that character is. So in Jake's case, he lives in a one room. You know, when you live in a one room, you have everything in the one room. So you have your bed, you have your stove, you have the bathing bucket or whatever that you'll be using for bathing, right? Yeah, the space is very limiting, right? So because everything that you need to do is all in that space, right? So the binary codes, they help. The binary oppositions, they help in the sense of exploring how the narrative will change. Because if your movie is just about one thing from start to finish, it doesn't become an interesting thing, right? But when your movie explores opposing but related ideas, it makes it much more interesting. Hate versus love, right versus wrong, good versus evil. When you do that, when you incorporate these elements into your narrative, they can help you come up with a much more better plot, much more better characters. Because one character could be good, which is the protagonist, for example. The other character could be evil, which is the antagonist, in a sense. So with that being said, once you have your thematic argument, you have your binary codes, now you want to explore your character binary. So this is also similar to binary codes, but it's much more about how does the character change. With the binary codes, it's about how does the plot change, right? The binary codes, more in a sense, they guide the plot of the story and the philosophical conflict. As I have said in the thematic argument, is that Jake is selling snacks because he's poor, right? In order for him to get rich, because his primary goal is to get money, is to get rich. His ambition is to get rich. So the character binary codes is that Jake is naive. When we meet him in Act 1, he's naive. At the end of Act 3, he has to become sophisticated. That will then reflect that there's a key lesson which he has learned. He has learned that it's not okay just to be easily trusting of individuals. That you can't just move around the world, not having full awareness of where you are. Even when he sells drugs, that's something that he's not experienced in, right? So he's an amateur when it comes to that. That forms part of his naive element.